My name is Nicolina Miller, and I am an Agile Marketing Specialist here at CMG Partners. For those of you who are not familiar, CMG is a marketing strategy consulting firm, and we help companies with their growth strategies, their product commercialization, and their marketing performance. And we have over 2 decades of experience bringing new technologies and products to market, working in really highly matrixed organizations. And for years, we've seen the same challenges in driving effectiveness and efficiency, driven by a lack of integration across functions and no cross-view of the data, no cross-view of the customers, and sometimes no customer-focused approach at all. And we have worked with those organizations to help break down these self-induced barriers to really drive meaningful productivity. And so as a result, we wanted to dive into this new phrase that we were hearing about called Agile. And so we spent the last 3 years talking to chief marketing officers, other lead marketers, Agile practitioners, and a lot of other Agile experts to really understand what does agility mean and how are these best-in-class companies achieving agility. And as a result of all the lessons and insights that we learned from this research, we have started to help marketing teams actually adopt this Agile process. So we've been working with a range of different teams, from 5 to 100 plus people, make the transformation through the trial and adoption and even the scaling of Agile for marketing. And what you'll hear me refer to it as throughout this presentation is A for M. And that's something, it's just an easier way for us to describe it, and we think it's a nice, catchy little phrase. So one thing that's really unique about the adoption process is that the symptoms are often different. Our clients have come to us for different reasons, but the solution is the same. Agile for marketing helps companies from all different shapes and sizes. And so we just think this is a really fantastic methodology that we're going to explain in more detail, obviously, in today's presentation. So what will we talk about today? We're assuming and presuming that those of you who are on the call already know what Agile is and why organizations use it. Because this is a webinar on scaling Agile, not necessarily learning about what Agile is. So we'll start with a brief overview of what Agile is, just to kind of get everyone on the same page. The remaining part of the talk today is really going to focus on what it means to scale Agile in an organization, what makes it stick, and examples from some of our clients and others to help really reinforce some of the points that I will talk about during our call today. And so one thing I'd like to highlight before we get started is that today's conversation in total should run 45 to 50 minutes. I'm hoping not to take up your full hour. I'll be chatting with you for about 30 to 40 minutes, and then I'd like to use the remaining time for questions. So during the discussion, you'll see a little question section in your GoToMeeting bar on the left side of your screen, or the right side of your screen. Not sure how you have it set up. But please, as I go through and as I'm talking with you guys today, please just submit any questions, and we'll do our best to get through as many as we can during our time today. Okay, so let's get started. What is Agile? It's a new marketing operating system, and we call it an operating system because it fundamentally changes the way you work and the way you think and the way you act as an organization, and at least it should if you do it right. So one thing to stress here is that it's not just the way you work, but it's also the way you think. And you'll hear me mention this a few times throughout our presentation today because we think this is such a critical component. Don't just focus on this methodology of doing it. It's also adopting this whole new way of thinking and getting your company to operate. So it's truly a customer-centric approach to doing business. It's very disciplined in its execution, but it really does allow a lot of flexibility in how you actually operate. And the result is really accountable and empowered teams. It empowers a mindset that enables this rapid learning and decision-making while integrating a methodology that enables the team to achieve goals that otherwise were pretty unachievable. But what is the actual benefit, right? We have seen from all the different companies we've helped adopt Agile and from all the experts we've talked to and all the CMOs who are using it, it drives operational excellence. But what does that mean? It's the ability to deliver on marketing performance. It's the alignment of the critical marketing organizational elements, such as marketing strategy, organization design, people, results, culture, leadership, resulting in the optimization of marketing. As you can see here from this visual, it's doing the right work at the right time with the right people, resulting in really delivery items that make an impact. And then most importantly, doing it better the next time. Agile really focuses on continuing to improve how you do things and creating a feedback loop that allows you not just to get things out to market and run on to the next, but actually think about what worked, what didn't, and making sure that each deliverable is better than the last. And most importantly, in this kind of environment, you have cross-functionality and collaborative teams working together to achieve a goal that they all have stacked hands on. They know exactly what they're working towards, and they're being held accountable. But when we get into most companies, they actually look like this command and control, where you have a boss who is driving down goals and objectives, and there's a really structured hierarchy and really bureaucratic processes that cause delay and inefficiencies in the way teams work. And it's described by things you see on the screen here: authority, formal roles, toll gates and checkpoints, and a lot of formal reviews. And what I would urge you to do at this point is take a look at this visual. Where do you think your organization is on this continuum? Most organizations move from this command and control approach to more of an individual accountability, where the higher you grow in the organization, the more accountability you have, which makes total sense, right? And some organizations take that and move it to create a really highly collaborative culture. But they have yet, at this point in the collaborative culture section, to actually make it to the shared accountability. And this area here is where you see performance really elevate. Team members feel accountable to each other, and they're working so well together and driving really effective change for the organization. So environments with this shared accountability are typically highly decentralized, the exact opposite of the command and control you see here on the top left, very empowered, and they're obviously, as I've mentioned now, highly, highly collaborative. So not surprisingly, Agile organizations live here to the right of your screen. Agile organizations have gotten to a place where there really is that shared accountability. They are empowered teams. The decision-making is at the front lines, right there at that table, and they're not waiting for approvals from, a couple rungs up the chain. And what's interesting here is that they feel accountable to each other as teams. And that shift from being accountable to yourself versus accountable to others has a really powerful impact on performance. Just think about any teams you've been working with. You know that you win as a team and you lose as a team. When you care just about the number of goals you score, it doesn't have the same impact on the motivations that you have and the delivery and the excellence that you're able to perform with. So as a result of being empowered and making these really effective decisions, each team member not only feels accountable, but they start to ask themselves the right questions, such as, what are the business implications here? What are we doing here? Why exactly are we doing this initiative? And one of our clients actually recently shared with us that one of the best outcomes of going to Agile was that her team actually grew in their ability to own and drive marketing decisions. Instead of waiting to be told what to do, they were being really proactive, asking the right question, and that freed up a lot of our clients' time to work on more strategy-related items instead of getting in the weeds with each of her employees. So if you move from that very formal hierarchy from the left side of the screen to this shared accountability area, these are the benefits you get from it. You get a better understanding of the market. You are closer to your customer. You really understand what's going on, and as a result, you're making smarter decisions. You also are being much less reactive, and you're being a heck of a lot more proactive. The speed of your anticipation and the speed of your response grows in incredible fashion. You're also making better decisions because, per point one, you really understand the market. So you're making smarter decisions at the front line. And you have happy and proactive teams. And I want to stop here because this is something that surprises a lot of our clients. When we go in to help companies adopt Agile, we implement a pre- and post-training analysis to get an understanding for where each team is against the key Agile metrics. And one of the things that we ask about is employee satisfaction. And our clients are always shocked to know that their satisfaction of all of their team members goes up so significantly during this process. And we mention it usually when we're helping clients get up to speed, but it's until they see it on paper, when they see the change from the before and after of adoption, that they really get it. And their employees are so much happier and much more proactive. Lastly, clarity of mission. People are marching together in the same direction. They know what they're working towards, and they know what they're working on, and they get how it fits into the better picture. This is critical. We believe that the clarity of the mission is one of the most important things to having a successful Agile adoption, and you'll hear me talk a lot more about this throughout. And one thing I want to, just take a step back and mention to you all is that I recently read a book called Boys in the Boat. I'm not sure if any of you have read it, but it's about the University of Washington rowing team who won the Olympics in the 30s. And they were total underdogs going in, but they found the right people in the right positions on the right team. And by putting together this combination, they really flourished. In a way, they are able to be in the boat, rowing, making decisions, and they are calling the shots when they're there in a way that a coach can't, standing on the shore, because each of the team members in the boat, they're on the front lines. They're seeing what the other boats are doing, and they're much closer to the issues. And most importantly, having to make the call ensured that their minds were actually in the boat, quote unquote in the boat, as they called it in the book. And think about that with anything that you do in your own life. When you're totally responsible for making a decision, you see all angles. You really process all the information, versus if you're just adding insights and weighing in on things, you don't really see the whole picture. You don't engage completely. So by increasing the quality of decision-making and speed at which they were made, they were extremely effective. And that empowerment put everyone in the game, and it drove accountability down to the individual and team level. And as a result, they were able to win the Olympics in the 30s. So just a great story I might come back to so that you guys can almost visualize what we're trying to work towards here, getting everyone working in motion towards the same exact goal and putting the decision-making down at the delivery team level, because they know best. They are there. They're on the front lines. So at this point, hopefully, this is what you're saying. All right, I'm in. Hopefully, I've made the case for you why Agile is such a great operating system to adopt. So the question is now, how do you get there? What's next? So one thing before we get into the how is just a clarification here. I want to make sure you guys are clear that there's a difference between what you see on the left here, which is doing Agile, and what you see on the right, which is being Agile. So on the left, you have Agile teams following Agile methods to deliver the work. On the right, you have the entire marketing organization that has embraced Agile. They are focused on what is right for the teams, what is right for the organizations. They're collaborating, they're transparent, and so on. And most companies just end up doing Agile. They look like what we see on the left here. They reorganize to address operational challenges, and they get some benefit from just working differently. So they kind of feel like, oh, we're doing it. We're seeing some benefits. Very few become Agile because it requires dealing with changing how people think, which is inevitably much more difficult. But this is where the real productivity gains come from. So what does it take to get there? How do I become Agile? How do I live in that space? And something we refer to here as the methodology and mindset is something that we explored in our research over the last couple of years to really putting together the most effective package, right? And that means you are really focusing on the fundamental structure and the roles that come with the methodology on the left side here. And you also have the desire to experience and innovate, to be transparent, to work well together, and all of that comes with the mindset. And you need the team members to feel accountable to do what is right on behalf of the team to achieve business performance. So how is this achieved? How can you operationalize Agile and not have it be an initiative that dies on the vine in 6 months? In other words, how do you make it stick? To make it stick, it takes fundamentally changing your operating system. It means you need to make sure that you're addressing each of these 5 areas when adopting Agile to make sure it has staying power. So what does that mean? Let's talk first here about focus. Focus means a crystal clear strategy. It means clear priorities at the organizational level. And we all know that Agile is about having efficiency and effectiveness, but you need a really clear strategy to know what to deliver. You don't just want to do things, be more efficient and be more effective at delivering things that don't matter and that aren't having an impact. So you need to make sure you're crystal clear on what exactly is going to move the needle for your organization. Culture. You need to make sure your culture is embracing the Agile principles. You need to make sure you're being collaborative, transparent, data-driven, customer-focused, and so on. But you can't just say that you're going to be that. You have to put measures in place. You have to put new processes in place to make sure that your organization is transforming into, for example, a data-driven organization. People. Truly empowered teams with joint accountability and the ability to flex what they work on, not just working on one in particular thing, is really what makes the system work. Process, the Agile delivery. This is the methodology you're using. This is really figuring out the best way to incorporate it into your business. As I mentioned earlier, Agile is something that can work for all different types of organizations, but it's not exactly the same in every organization. You need to study the methodology and figure out how it's going to work best and fit into the way your business does business. And most importantly, leadership. You need, and this is so critical, active, engaged leadership championing the change. If you don't have advocates throughout all the different leadership positions, this is really not going to stick, because you have one naysayer and their whole team that reports up to them is going to be disenchanted by this. And as I'll talk about later, it's going to be rocky in the beginning. And if you have a few bad eggs sitting there, it's quite toxic for the adoption process, and we really feel that it's critical to make sure each person who's in a leadership position within the marketing team is on board. And we have a lot of strategies to get there, but really important to just set the stage there that you will have to get each of your leadership team members to a place of advocacy for this to stick. So how does everything we've been talking about for the last 20 minutes or so translate into what this looks like from an operating standpoint? So what we have on this slide here is an example of how an Agile process works when it scales. So let's start with strategy, this top row here. You have marketing goals, you have marketing priorities, you have KPIs, and presumably even some kind of marketing roadmap. It is a responsibility of the marketing leadership team to make sure that that strategy is built and the strategy is most importantly clear, and that everyone has agreed to exactly what you're working towards. You will then prioritize that strategy in this process column here. What is most important that you accomplish? You can't necessarily get everything done. Hopefully you will, but you have to make sure that there's always priorities aligned with each and every item that you have in your strategy. And also assign a budget. You don't need it to be exact, but you need a rough idea of what you're going to have to spend to get these things done. Next, once you've prioritized those items, you then put delivery teams against it with a business owner or team lead. The business owner will be responsible for prioritizing at the program level. So you hand over as many programs as you'd like to that business owner and delivery team. And you say, this is what you guys are going to be responsible for. That business owner then prioritizes and will hand over the appropriate initiatives to the delivery team, who will then self-organize to say, okay, you've given us these items for our sprint. We know what the priority is because of our understanding of the bigger strategy, and so we're going to prioritize within the sprint. So in summary, large organizations are prioritizing at 3 different levels: at the strategy level here at the top, at the program level, and at the execution level. And the organization is holding teams and team members accountable at 3 levels with really crisp metrics. You also have a program manager in there who's going to oversee your different business owners to make sure that everything's going smoothly with the Agile adoption. And it's also helpful to have a governance committee, an Agile governance committee, who you can just take things to, who's keeping an eye on the process and metrics and making sure everything's going smoothly. So in summary, the guiding light here is your strategy. Agile does not mean your absent strategy. You need to know what you're trying to speed the delivery up of. So it really starts here at the strategy, and as you can see, you prioritize it in 3 different places. So that seemed quite easy, right? Oh, I can do that. I can prioritize at those 3 levels. But what gets in the way? What we've seen, and what this version 1 study reinforces, is that culture is really the biggest barrier to a successful Agile adoption. Teams and leaders typically don't have that hard of a time getting the mechanics in place, the methodology in place. They have a hard time getting from doing Agile to being Agile. And so that's just something to keep in mind as you consider this adoption, consider scaling, because this culture barrier might be an issue for you, and we have some strategies for how to make sure it doesn't get in the way of a successful adoption. So what are the 3 areas to get started? First, you need to focus on the behaviors you actually need to change. Take a look at your culture. Where are you weakest when you compare against the Agile principles? One quick shameless plug here. We have recently designed an Agile readiness test that assesses your team and each individual team member to see how do they fare against all the Agile principles. And the benefit of it is that it will help you figure out first where to pilot. What team is really looking great? What team is already, adopting this Agile mindset? And even more importantly, you know the individuals who might need a little more coaching, a little more help getting there, and you've also identified some of your rock stars, people who you can make your Scrum Masters and your business owners who are going to help be advocates for you for this adoption. So feel free to reach out after this webinar. I'm happy to give any more detail on the Agile Readiness Test. The next is to identify strategic drivers by which to align your operations. And that's really focusing on the methodology. This means you are identifying a really clear strategy and really clear priorities before you get started. As I've mentioned, you don't just want to become more effective and more efficient at something that really isn't going to move the needle for you, and that might be taking your organization in the wrong direction. And lastly, establish leadership governance to drive change. You need to get leadership on board, and you need to develop a process to get them there. You can't just have a presentation to leadership and expect that that's going to move the needle for them. You need to develop a customized strategy to make sure you're moving people along the continuum to advocacy and acceptance of this new process. So what we'll do for the remainder of the time is go into detail on these three areas. We'll give you an overview of what they mean, and then we'll give you a case study on where we found some issues with some of our clients and how we were able to overcome those to have a really successful Agile adoption. So first, focus on the behaviors you need to change. Organizations, more often than not, focus on the process more than the culture. And we find it's much more valuable to focus on the true behaviors you need to change and to develop, most importantly, a mitigation plan for them. You need to accept where you're weak and then commit to making change to make a change. And it's really important here that you solve directly for those behaviors you need to change. Next, we all know that Agile is supposed to be a customer-centric methodology, but more often than not, one of the main reasons for its failure is not doing enough diligence on your customer, either internal or external. So when we work with new clients, we spend a significant amount of time helping them aggregate what they know about their customers, helping them, make heads or tails of it and identify the gaps that they may have on their customers. And then we'll design a strategy to do more research to fill that, because we think it's such a critical component to a successful adoption, is making sure you're making decisions based on what your customers' wants and needs look like. Excuse me. So this is a major behavioral change to really get in the rhythm of using customer insights to drive decisions. But often companies put together their marketing backlog based on things they just need to get done, things they believe they need to get done, versus thinking about things like, which customers can I win with? What are their unique needs, and how can I influence their buying behavior? Lastly, you want to get people comfortable being T-shaped. And what that means is having breadth of knowledge and depth of experience. So in an Agile environment, people are really well suited for their roles. They're generally T-shaped. They have an entrepreneurial spirit and ability to execute on that entrepreneurial vision because the culture allows them to. And they also feel like they have skin in the game. And furthermore, T-shaped people generally have better business acumen because they have more exposure to more facets of the business, and they have a better understanding of all the interdependencies that exist. If they're just working in one individual silo, working on delivering just the one thing they're good at, they're not going to have the big picture in mind. So while you still want to leverage people's strengths and expertise, you also want to make sure that they are fully used and balanced on the team. So what we recommend for our clients is formal training. Use development plans and 360s on where people need to grow next to contribute greater to the team. And what we like to do is say, okay, what individual was maybe overused in a sprint, and who was underused? And let's focus on getting that person who was underused to better understand the area of the business where maybe there's just a lot of need. So maybe there's a lot of need for social media. So take one of your individuals, and what we say to our clients is include a backlog item that has that individual shadowing another individual who maybe has a lot more on their plate and is their services are much more in demand. So this allows that individual to not just be trained in another area, but trained in an area that's going to be really useful for that delivery team. So changing culture. One way to identify the main behaviors that need to change is with a pre-training survey to baseline against Agile indicators. I talked about this a little bit earlier, and what it does is it gives us and the client a really holistic understanding of where they are now versus where they want to get to, and where they need to focus as a result. This helps us prioritize where to get started, and then we run this survey every quarter to see if progress is being made on those key cultural elements. So for a large global public telecom client, this survey identified 4 priority areas that really needed to change. The first was collaboration. There were big challenges between field marketing and corporate marketing in how they worked together. And at the root of it was that there were just different goals and objectives and different performance drivers for each individual. So how are you going to get people to march towards the same outcome if they're all being driven by different agendas? So the company aligned the performance review goals of all team members to the same goals and objectives for their Agile delivery team. And that's something important to note, that you don't need the same exact drivers for your whole marketing organization. You just need to customize it for each delivery team. So each team is focused on being accountable to each other and being collaborative because they all know exactly what they're all working towards. The next piece that we identified where this company was a little bit weak was being iterative and experimental. They weren't actually learning from what they put into market. They were just throwing out deliverables into the market and running to the next thing because they were so busy. They didn't have time to focus on making things better. They could only focus on getting things out the door. So what we did is we added formal team reviews of data and insights to specifically drive decision making, and we incorporated that into sprint planning. So we set goals for both delivery and for things that required you to get better. And the way we did that was by making acceptance criteria focused on not only the delivery of the item, but also on learning objectives from a particular test. The third cultural element that we identified where this client was a little bit weak was empowerment. Teams just felt like they were being told what to do. They did not have any ability to make their own decisions. So we had to work pretty heavily with the leadership team to really relinquish that control, to loosen the reins, to say you have to trust your team. They are going to perform so much better if you just trust them and give them the resources to make decisions on their own. And lastly, they were not particularly customer focused. There wasn't a lot of cross knowledge on the customer. There were little packets of information with different groups, but there was a need for the entire team to focus more on who the customer was and what they needed, how to influence them, etc. So what we did is we instituted data reviews and customer interviews to help them inform the marketing work stack, and we included that in each sprint. Talk to 3 customers this sprint. Ask them these key questions. Execute some kind of survey. Make sure you're focusing on the customer, and then sharing that information with the other Agile teams in your sprint review. Invite as many people as you can. So we have all this great information about our customer. Let's get together. So bottom line, when you're very clear on the behaviors that you need to change, you can design a solution to mitigate it. So the key learnings for us on this client was really to focus on the people first. Get your culture ducks in a row before you get started. Then you can bring in the process. You want to make sure you're setting up ongoing measurement around the behaviors to make sure that you're not just saying you're going to be data-driven, but you're actually saying, okay, 3 times a week, we're going to address our data, or whatever it may be. Lastly, align the team goals, objectives, and incentives. They all need to be the same, and incentive, within their even bonus structure. Make sure everyone is being incentivized on the team the same way, so that you really make them gel and you make them all excited about achieving 1 goal, or 2 goals, or 3 goals, because it affects them all equally. So what was the impact of everything I just shared with you? What you see here is the data from our pre and post Agile adoption analysis. The line in orange is where they were pre-adoption, and the line is blue is where they were just after 3 months of using Agile. So you see they're more collaborative. They are incredibly more iterative, from a 2.6 to a 4. They're much more empowered, 2.6 to a 4.4, and they are starting to get much more customer focused. So this is one way of actually tracking, are you moving the needle where you need to move it? Next, you need to make sure you're identifying the strategic drivers by which to align the operation. So I've seen the term, the marketing plan is dead. But I really disagree. You still need a marketing roadmap. You have to have a starting point. The difference is you build in the flexibility to change. So without a clear strategy, without clear priorities, and an initial plan of the work to achieve your goals, Agile teams really will struggle. So you just need to make sure you have some organizing principle that everyone can understand. As organizations, as you know, they can't do it all. You have to have clarity on the priorities on what will help you grow the business best. And you have to make choices about which products, which geographies are most critical to your growth. And it's going to affect your strategy all the way down to your go-to-market program. So once your strategy is set and your priorities are clear, you need to align your operations against those strategic drivers. And we call this picking your orientation with this visual here in the cross section. You need to identify your core growth levers and align teams there. So how do you want to make the trade-offs, and what best supports your business goals? For example, how can you best go to market to reach your customers? Is it by function? And this is how a lot of companies are organized. Or is it by customer segment? Or is it by product? So companies need to really think about what their strategic priorities are to best align their Agile teams to deliver against them. So once you've picked your orientation, you need to recognize that however you structure your teams, you're going to be prioritizing. If you organize by customer segment here across, you'll be prioritizing across your products. Which products are most needed by this customer group where I can win best? On the flip side, if you organize by product, you're going to have to prioritize by customer segment. Organizations really paralyze themselves by not prioritizing. So when we help companies adopt, this is a really hard piece for organizations to accept, because they really want to try and support everything, products and segments and solutions with multiple target segments. But what we really encourage them to do is prioritize. Hopefully you can get there, and hopefully you can get it all done, but make sure there's a prioritization system within everything you want to get done to make sure that you're delivering the most impact early on and learning from that. So an example we have here for you is actually not one of our case studies per se, but it gives a good example of exactly how a company brings Agile to life. And taking a step back to operationalize really requires determining how you're going to operate as a team, how your strategy is turned into a fluid delivery approach, when and where you're going to revisit plans, and knowing that nothing Agile is actually set in stone. So for version 1, they go into a new year with 5 to 7 strategic priorities to achieve business goals determined by the marketing leadership team. Agile does not mean no plan, as I've mentioned a few times now. It means flexibility to change the plan of record, to set something knowing that it's not set in stone. Those strategies are then broken down into marketing goals. The goals are set by the Agile teams working with the marketing leadership team. And they set the marketing initiatives at the annual level for budgeting purposes, but it's guided by monthly planning. That marketing planning happens monthly, giving the teams the ability to revisit the plan and review what they've learned each month. So while they have this idea of what they're going to accomplish in the year, they're making sure they're addressing it on a monthly basis to make sure they're moving in the right direction. Another interesting thing to note for these guys is that their goals are 50% things they want to do and 50% things where they can get better. So it's one way to structure these key priorities. It's not just about all these fancy new things you want to get done. It's also about how do we make sure we're improving what we're already doing. And then lastly, on the weekly basis, the teams are going to self-organize to deliver against those priorities sent down from the monthly planning. So the third piece in terms of getting started is to make sure you establish leadership governance to drive the change. So first, think about how you're going to affect that change. What type of communications are needed to the organization, and how are you going to reinforce the behaviors you're looking for? Next, and most importantly, how are you going to inspire active and engaged leadership? It takes a lot of time for a new culture to take root, to get into the rhythm of feeling the impact of a new way of working. So leadership needs to continually support and engage the teams and celebrate the small wins. Show up for sprint reviews. When a Scrum Master comes to you needing to get things unblocked, help as much as you can. Be involved. Show that you're committed to this process, understanding that it's going to take some extra time from you in the beginning. Lastly, build a really thoughtful approach to bringing along the needed stakeholders. Make sure that everyone understands this new approach and making sure they're aware of what to expect. If you've been delivering, a complete sales kit, for example, to the sales team, and all of a sudden you're going to start delivering pieces every 2 weeks, you need to make sure that your key internal stakeholders understand this and know what to expect and are at least supportive of trying a new way of working. You've made the case for them. You've shown your enthusiasm for it. And they just need to be in the loop on how it's going to change the way you do business with them. So one of the biggest challenges we had with a very large global internet media client was in getting the leadership team on board and supporting the effort. Operationalizing and institutionalizing Agile in marketing meant putting in place 3 things. 1 was the right governance, 2 is the right change management efforts, and 3 is the right communication plan. And most importantly, you need to understand where people are on this continuum here. Where are stakeholders on this spectrum, and where are you as a leadership team? You then need to work to put in place the right communication plans and the right touch points and the right management efforts to move people along the continuum. At the end of the day, you need the leadership at the commitment and advocate level, right? You need your leadership at a 5 and a 6. If they're going to be driving the change, if they're going to have marketing teams looking to them for advice and enthusiasm for this, it's imperative that each leader is on the 5 or a 6. You really only need your stakeholders, though, at the understanding and acceptance level. As long as they're not working against you, and as long as you're keeping them well informed, that's fine. But leadership, again, has to be at a 5 or a 6. So what we did with this internet media client was we went through all the stakeholders and the leadership team members and identified where everyone was on this continuum. And we then put a communications plan together for how to get each individual from A to Z. And as a result, we successfully moved every single stakeholder and team member into their appropriate place on the continuum to ensure a really smooth Agile takeoff. So to wrap up the discussion, before we get into questions, I wanted to just have one place for all the learnings we've talked to today. And this is a great slide here just to print out and put on your desk. Just something to remind you of all the key things you need to make sure you're considering in an Agile adoption. So first, focus on the culture as much as the process. It's really about identifying where you may have weaknesses within your organization and designing mitigation processes to help. The next is to make sure you're doing your diligence on your customer. Put them at the center of decision making and have the data to back it. Train people. Get them comfortable doing more than just what they came in doing. They're going to feel like they're contributing more, and they're going to feel like much more a part of the team versus just being a specialist in one area. Push the marketing organization to have that really clear strategy and clear priorities. If you don't have these in place before you get started, it's not even worth adopting Agile. Align your teams in a way that reflects your desired end state of business. Pick an orientation that works best for your organization. Is it going to be big by customer base? Is it going to be by product? How exactly is it going to be best suited for your team? Then once you've picked that orientation, you need to make sure you're able to prioritize at that strategy level, at the program level, and at the execution level. You always know what's most important because you have such a clear idea of what your North Star is. You also want to make sure you're taking that time to put together a really purposeful change management plan, just like I mentioned that we did at that large media client. Identify where people are in the spectrum and design a communications plan to move them along the continuum for where they need to end up. Get people excited. Get them to drink the Kool-Aid. Get them really excited about this Agile adoption. You need your leaders to be at that 5 or 6 level on the continuum. So find really unique ways to encourage them and get them excited about what the marketing organization is about to transform into. And as I mentioned, build a thoughtful approach to bringing along those needed stakeholders. Think about that change management plan, number 7, and then build a really great plan to address all of the different stakeholders and leaders that you need to move along. And lastly, be patient. This is something that we try and stress, but it usually doesn't get through because people just want to see the impact right out of the gate. As one CMO put it for us, when you get started, you're going to feel like you're taking 2 steps back before you take 1 step forward. You're going to break things. It's going to get messy. It's going to get harder before it gets easier. But take it 1 step at a time, iterate, improve, and adjust, and you'll be so happy in the end with the impact that this has on your organization. So that's it for today, everybody, in terms of me talking at you. So now it's time for some questions. Our team is looking through some of the questions you guys have submitted. So I'm just going to take a look at some of those. So great question here we have. How do you determine which projects to choose Agile for? There's a few things to consider here. One is you want to make sure that that pilot team really tests the full operating system. You want to select a team that's going to enable you to stress test prioritization across teams with shared services and stakeholders. It also has to be a high priority to the business, because when this works, it needs to have that strength, and it's going to make a difference. If it's some team that really doesn't make a big difference, no one's going to care that much if you have incredible results. You also have to make sure that that pilot, given that it's only 3 months, you want to put a team together who has a really good base of work in terms of strategy, and they know exactly what they're working towards. So don't waste too much time trying to get your strategy in place if you already have a team that's there and they know exactly what they're working towards. You also want to make sure that Agile teams can control 50 to 70% of the work within their team, right? You can't have a team that has only 20% of the work they can get done with their delivery team, and then they have to outsource the other 80%. That doesn't make for a really Agile environment. Also, you want to make sure you're growing your evangelists. So identify a team that already has that culture in place. And I'll quickly plug again for the Agile Readiness Test. If you use that test, you can identify which teams are already really well suited for an Agile adoption. And lastly, I think another important point would be to find teams that have rapid learning cycles that can really benefit from quick wins and learning from that. Not a team that maybe has one event in 6 months that they're working towards. Let's find a team that has quick deliverables and that you can start to really incorporate that feedback loop.